Oh, this bright afternoon, a very good afternoon to you. So what did April offer us? Well, and it's not to be belittled, it gave us the feel-good factor, a bit of warmth, daffodils, the lawn waking up. Perhaps it was all that prompted Kim Jong-un and President Moon of South Korea to give us a few minutes of the totally unbelievable. Two leaders of a divided nation, still officially at war, chatting and smiling, and all the things we associated with normal leaders meeting. Perhaps the Koreas will join together at the same time as Port Erin and Port St Marian. On the island, the clauses of the abortion bill have been assessed by the Keys, and after a third reading, providing that's successful, it will go upstairs to LegCo. After that, it's been through. Will LegCo find anything to alter? We heard a difference of views on whether there were places in the dentist's chair. Now, this will hurt a little. The Castle Mona went back on sale, and there was a difference of views on last year's tourism figures, which we may be touching upon in just a moment. A major store closed one of its outlets on the island. Joining me to assess, judge even, Rob Callister, Onchan MHK, and member of the Department for Enterprise on Tourism. Good afternoon to you. Is it good afternoon?
Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon. Or Tim Baker, Ayre and Michael member, overseeing in a political sort of way the meat plant, and indeed the stuff that comes out of Peel Harbour at the moment, which I'll be talking to you about in a minute. And just finishing his term as chairman in Ramsey of the Commissioners, Andy Cowie. Hello, Andy. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Cowie. The question is, are you going back to the hustings? Do you fancy that job? You've had it for 2 years now.
Well, very much. I've definitely enjoyed it, I must admit. It is a lot of work, to be fair. But yeah,
but you've taken to it, obviously, and you issued a statement looking back with some pride, if you can use the word pride without being too big-headed about it, about what you've achieved during the year, which is quite useful. Yeah,
I would say it's not me, it's the whole board as a whole. I've worked really hard the last couple of years, and we're making some significant improvements in the town, we think, and we need to keep up that momentum and keep trying.
Let's just talk to you about the town hall, the courthouse, etc., because they're looking for a submission of expressions of interests. Friday the 11th of May, I think it is. Any indications that there's going to be a flood of people beating at the door?
I wouldn't say a flood, but there's certainly been some significant interest. We've had some quite serious and interesting proposals, we just wait till the end of the submission date and see what turns up at the end.
Have you any idea in your mind what you'd like to see that courthouse being used for?
We have a vision of what we'd like.
We'd
like a sort of multifunctional building with some sort of community space, ideally, and perhaps a cafe or the like, and potentially some other functioned office spaces, or maybe a little sort of artist hub would be a nice feature. Maybe the likes of St Ives is a good sort of model for that, where they have small artist workshops and the like. Any combination of those would be great, and we'll see what comes through.
Have you had a look inside it? I mean, what conditions?
Yes, we've had a good look round. It's not in bad condition. I mean, obviously it's a very old historic building, but it has been reasonably well looked after by the DHA, and it doesn't need an awful lot of work to get it open again. If there's any significant structural changes required for whatever use we put to it, that may be a different story.
So May the 11th, wait and see who comes forward.
Indeed, yes, but it's certainly looking very, very exciting.
Well, it's all to do with the idea of making the island an attractive place to visit, obviously, although tourism is not quite doesn't attract the figures it used to once. I think in the statement from ShopRite, they cited a figure in Millennium of 740,000. I've always heard the figure of 660,000, the same as in 1913, the last really big year of tourism. But putting that to one side, obviously the amount of people coming to visit the island has been very much in the news. And with me in the studio is Rob Callister, obviously from the Department for Enterprise. I'm just going to play a bit of what you have said on this, Mr. Callister, before we go to you. Just under £500,000 is being spent per year apparently on promoting the island, and you are quoted as saying part of a new approach will be working more closely with the tourism industry.
Well, I think we've got to give this new agency model an opportunity and a chance. The industry themselves will have a greater input, and they will actually set the course. So instead of government implementing a strategy and expecting industry to pick it up, what we're hoping is the industry themselves will pick the direction and the course the Isle of Man tourism sector should take.
One of the people who are actually in the middle of the tourism sector is the owner of the Welbeck, Michael George. He had a good year last year. In spite of that reported drop in visitor numbers, he is pushing for what he calls a rethink of tourism policy on the island. He insists that if there was a slump, if it was 25,000 down, it can't be blamed entirely on the government's tourism chiefs.
We've got to get our product spot on. We have a fantastic island that you'd think we'd be able to sell. Treat our customers right when they get here, from actually when they depart their destination until they get here and while they're here. And you'd hope that we'd be able to keep them and send them home happy, and they'd tell their friends.
Well, let's go to Mr. Callister now. How important to the island is tourism? I mean, if tourism disappeared tomorrow, if we didn't have any tourists coming at all, would it affect the economy to that degree?
I think it would, but it would also affect a lot of the services we deliver locally because they interact. So if we had no tourism industry, we'd have a lot less facilities for locals to use as well. So tourist is vital in my eyes. It's an incredibly difficult sector, and it's one that we're working really hard to improve the quality of what's being delivered here and making the Isle of Man more attractive for people to come, especially in challenging times when there's so many other destinations of choice.
Do we have a target in that? I mean, we say every year we say this many people came and that was nice, or oh dear, we've dropped a few. Is there a target in which we say we do need to have this level of tourists coming to make it worthwhile?
No, I don't think we have.
Shouldn't we have one then?
Well, I'm not sure, because every time we mention a figure, it upsets other people. So it's easier just to say that we attract as many people as we can. We make sure that hotels are busy, our attractions are busy. Low people come into the Isle of Man, spend money, and I've got some figures here. I know we keep talking about the actual passenger survey, but as I said in my Tynwald questions, TT was up 2.6%, the festival motorcycling 2.9%. The actual overall spend was up. The overall nights spent in hotels was up. I think it's also mentioning that we've also created an additional 99 jobs over year on year at last year. So all the signs are positives. Plus, we take the positive figures from the airline and we take the positive data from the steam packet. As far as I'm concerned, they're all pluses. Plus, we take into account industry themselves are saying they're doing okay. So on top of all of that, that's where I base my confidence on. I don't base it on a passenger survey, which was a snapshot taken at whatever time. And I do have to...
There are some that might say, yes, you would say that if they did,
no,
but you're saying, no, it's not important.
I would be absolute... I say, as I said in Tynwald, John, if the industry was telling me that their hotel bookings are down, attractions are down, and suddenly the publication of a report reported a massive increase in passengers, I would certainly be questioning that, exactly the same as I am the passenger survey.
With a smile on your face, though. I mean,
yeah, it will
be enjoying it slightly.
I absolutely love, working with the tourism industry. They really go beyond what's required, really, a lot of the time, just to make sure that we are delivering the Isle of Man for people to come. And there's much more needs to be done.
Can I just switch to Mr. Baker there? Do you agree the island is going in the right direction as far as this is concerned?
I think we've got some challenges. Clearly, the market is changing, and we have.
Have we changed enough to actually keep up with that?
I think that we've got a number of challenges, and obviously the part of the issue is the cost of getting people here. But I think, personally, I think we're not quite communicating clearly enough what we've got to offer as an island, and I think we've got, particularly on a day like this, we've got a beautiful island, which I'm not sure there's the awareness in the adjacent islands of both the beauty of the place and the diversity that we have to offer here. And I think we've got the Biosphere accreditation, which is it's international significance. Chief Minister did actually say that he felt that we weren't making enough of that in terms of marketing the island, and I've got to agree with that. And I think it's a difficult challenge because we've got to keep evolving. We've got a core motorsport offering which is strengthening, particularly around TT. But we've got a whole tourist season.
But our USP basically is that the island has what it has. I mean, I've always thought a good advert for 30 seconds would be to run a camera from the top of South Brule, just let it wheel round 360 with a skylight going in the background, and at the end get someone like John Rhys Davis to say, the Isle of Man, look what you're missing, and just leave it at that, so people could see how big the island was and what it actually had. Absolutely.
We've got some incredible things on this island that we just probably take for granted because they're around us all the time. Certainly when I have visitors over personally, particularly if they've not been to the island either before or perhaps since they were children, they're actually really amazed by what we've got here. And I think the challenge is to communicate that across to the markets, in the UK and Ireland. But we've got to also make it an end-to-end affordable solution for them, because the competition that we've got doesn't have the cost of getting to and from the island. So we have that. It is significant, although I think certainly the airline fares now can be very, very competitive, and certainly as a foot passenger on the boat, I think it's great value. But what we've got to do is get that across to draw people here. We have a unique product.
Rob Callister, do you think the line, the Isle of Man, we're bigger than you think, would be a good strap line?
Well, we've just launched a brand new video, which is called Isle of Man, an extraordinary story. And it has, as you've mentioned, John Rhys-Davies, who's very well known within the film industry. And we're absolutely privileged to have him as the voiceover for our new video. And it does showcase the Isle of Man. And we're getting a lot of hits from that. It's been well received by industry. We're now going to promote, and I take on board what Tim said. We do have to reach further into the UK to try and attract more people. I think the TT is a fantastic shop window, but what we need is to attract those visitors come over for those 2 weeks, to come over later in the year. We're desperately looking at ways of expanding our season. We're trying to reach out to our industry on island to make sure that they've got bookings for longer in the year than previously. So this is a work in progress. As I said previously, the Isle of Man marketing budget just for tourism is £445,000. That is compared to Jersey, that has over £2 million to market its island. So we're competing incredibly well with very tight financial restraints. And I know some of my colleagues have said that we should take some of the motorsport funds that's used for TT and use that to promote the Isle of Man more. However, the TT does generate nearly £30 million in economic value, plus it generates around £6 million in VAT receipts.
There is a survey going on at the moment to find out exactly how much we do get out of the TT, which indicates we don't really know.
Well, it's no, the survey, the project that's ongoing, which has been led by Dr. Allinson on behalf of the Cabinet Office, is actually to see what, realistically, the negative, how many businesses are having to close down as effect of the TT, and actually assess the overall cost of the thing, but also taking into account businesses closing, people going on holiday, but also some of the positives.
Can I just switch to Mr. Baker, because he's sitting there shaking his head?
Yeah, I mean, the exercise that's going on now came out of the Vision 9 inquiry, and I was on the Economic Policy Review Committee, which recommended this economic assessment of the TT. It's absolutely not designed to pick out the negatives. It's designed to take a balanced view across the whole of the proposition, and actually evaluate how much does it actually contribute to the island. The bottom line was that the department government didn't know how much the TT was worth to the island, and it was a very clear recommendation from the Vision 9 review that was addressed, because otherwise you're having a pillow fight in the dark. We could actually be under-investing in the TT.
But it will also, Tim, you have to agree, will pick up the negatives. Businesses will respond and say, well, I have to close my business for 2 weeks. And they will say, well, I go off island and everything else. So it will, even if it's inadvertently, will pick up some of the negatives with regard to...
It's a balanced assessment. And, there's no doubt that the TT transforms the island for a period of time, as does the Festival of Motors.
If I can just interject there to Andy Cowie, how important is tourists and tourist figures to Ramsey? Do you find many tourists find their way up to Ramsey, and why are they there? Have they got enough to do?
There's loads to do in Ramsey, obviously.
But what? I mean, if you're a tourist arriving in Ramsey and look around, what would you think they would be heading for?
Personally, I'd be looking for the Moorwood Park, which is the jewel in our crown. It's a delightful park. It's beautiful in the summer. I think it takes some beating anywhere in the UK. Our offering in independent shops and retail within Ramsey, I think, is second to none within the island, and are slightly different from the normal supermarket sort of like major retailers experience that you'd get in perhaps a similar northwest town.
So you don't need some sort of draw, some sort of building, something that would draw people to Ramsey. You think you've got enough at the moment?
Oh no, I mean we certainly
always
like
have more.
On
Obviously,
that. We need more, but we have a very good offering. People enjoy visiting Ramsey.
We're just talking about disruption, and one thing that is going to disrupt things for 3 years is the promenade redevelopment. It's going to involve a lot of work. In fact, Ray Harmer used the phrase, it's going to be all-encompassing.
Nothing's been done since early 1930s, which is quite incredible. We're nearly, not coming far off to 100 years when there weren't the services that we now anticipate now. So the prom will be a whole new venture for the 21st century, including things like electrical charging points, a whole new street lighting scheme. But all the services will be there ready so that you will not need to dig up and do it again. It's done once.
Rob Callister, it's not going to help the tourism effort, is it, having that going on for 3 years?
It's not, and I've already voiced my concerns, but I think when we do see the final plans, I really realistically do not want to see the prom entirely closed for 3 years. Or what I've asked for is a sliding scale along the prom. Start one end and work your way across, and then allow the businesses to interact.
Work at nights as well?
If required, but we need to get it done. There's however hard it's going to be.
Can we quote you on that? Minister suggests working at night on the promenade.
I mean, however it's got to be done is we desperately need it. I'm more concerned about retail. I'm concerned about the hotels. However it's unfolded, it needs to make sure that it's done as quickly as possible, but it desperately needs to be done.
Mr. Baker, again shaking your head. Why?
Well, it's very easy to sit on the outside and sort of say that this is a really disruptive piece of work. The reality is that it needs doing, and it needs investment, and you have to do it properly. It's a major piece of work. It's been planned for several years.
We've already had one store citing that as part of the reason why they're closing down.
Well,
ShopRite in Chester Street.
ShopRite did cite that. They cited many other factors, all of which seem to be external to their business. And personally, I think it's very easy to look around you and sort of say that all these factors are occurring that are having an adverse effect on us. Actually, the reality is that the environment in which people like ShopRite are operating is changing rapidly, and it brings a lot of challenges for their business as it does for other retailers. And the ones that are successful, the ones that adapt, that continue to invest and change their offering as customer requirements change. And I was quite surprised and disappointed to hear ShopRite effectively blaming everybody else and not really looking at their own business.
It'd be interesting if in some way the promenade could be made into a tourist attraction, like you could have sections of it where people could be explain to people what's underneath and what's happened and all that sort of thing, so they could actually get some benefit out of it. Just a suggestion there, Minister, that's all. Let's take a break.
Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello, welcome to Present Politics. John Moss in the chair. I've been calling Mr. Callister a minister, which he's not yet. Rob Callister, Department for Enterprise, but he's in charge of tourism. Andy Cowie, just stepped down as chairman of Ramsey Commissioners, but possibly indicating that he wouldn't mind another crack at it as well because he enjoys the job so much. And Tim Baker, the Ayre and Michael member. I have to get used to that because it's relatively new. I'm disappointed to hear this from a listener that Mr. Cowie didn't mention the Queen's Pier as a positive indication of Ramsey's heritage. I suppose at the moment, I did ask you the question about what attractions are there. At the moment, all you can do with Queen's Pier really is have a look at it. And the men are labouring away there at the moment. That's all at the moment.
Indeed, and it is a very attractive pier as well, and I've no doubt that as soon as the work's complete and people can get on the pier, that will be another huge draw for the town, which is great. But
all you can do is pier at the moment. Mr. Callister, you wanted to return to ShopRite.
Yeah, I felt when I looked at or when I heard the announcement of the Chester Street closure, I feel it myself personally. It's a wake-up call for government. It's a wake-up call for private landlords and to Douglas Corporation. And the three of them need to get together. I had a quick look yesterday, and I looked at 2 units in Strand Street, £68,000 per annum for one, and £61,000 for the other, and they're not huge units. So I definitely think that the shop value in Douglas have been overinflated for many, many years, and I think we do need a set of realism of how much rent is charged in our capital. We then have to take in consideration, because one of the things that Bill Shuman's MHK has said, that there's too much development outside of Douglas, and we need to look at the sites that we already have.
He's chairman of a committee looking into brownfield sites.
He is, and obviously when you look at this, if we are going to attract more businesses back into Douglas, then we have to look at those. We've also got to take and consider rates and utility cost. There's absolutely no way a new business could actually set up in Douglas with those sort of levels of cost without even having a customer through the door.
Do we subsidise them? Does the government subsidise them?
I think what we need is some sort of investigation, or to look at how we can attract business and how we can support businesses, especially in our capital. I think most independent shop units, if you're thinking of setting up a business, you go to Ramsey or you go to Peel. I think Ramsey is absolutely cornered the market for new businesses that actually establish themselves there to get themselves established. The rent levels are fine, the rates and everything else. There's a lot of support there as well.
Is that a distinct policy, is it, up in Ramsey?
Yeah, we're very keen to encourage independent retail into Ramsey, and we do everything we can to support new shops.
It's the answer, isn't it, Mr. Baker, is getting people to get in there and then help them once they're in there to flourish.
Well, absolutely, and I think that is the government approach to through Department for Enterprise. There's a lot of support structures there, which obviously Rob's far more involved in the detail of that than I am. But we've got to create a vibrant economy to create the society that we want. But I think one thing we mustn't lose sight of when we're talking about retail is a very dynamic environment, and it's been hugely impacted by the growth of internet shopping.
Yeah.
And a lot of the issues that there are around.
However much you encourage people, they are not going to come away from the internet, are they? It's the die is cast. People will do their shopping on it because it's amazing. You go on the internet, and the next day the thing arrives at your doorstep.
Absolutely, and it's the choice as well, that the breadth of.
What do we do about that?
Well, I think you've got to work with the market rather than work against it. The Isle of Man isn't going to stop the growth of internet retailing. What the Isle of Man's got to do is to try and understand what it's got and actually nurture that. And I think, going back to the point that's been made about the independent shops in Ramsey, for instance, it's the ones that are thriving are the ones that are differentiated, and the ones that offer a service element. There's some tremendous shops.
So it had to be inventive. The island is going to have to be inventive and think on its feet.
Absolutely. Personally, I think the islands had it relatively easy for a fairly long period of time. Lots of years of unbroken economic growth, and actually that breeds a little bit of complacency. And now that's all changed. Government finances have changed, the wider economy's changed, the international environment has changed, and we have to adapt. We have to be resilient. We will. I'm absolutely confident of that. The history of the Isle of Man is about adaptation and innovation, and I'm absolutely certain that we will do that. But we've got to prepare to roll our sleeves up and really work hard.
Well, while we've got you in front of the microphone there, let's go on to the meat plant, because you are obviously the member with responsibility in that area. And can I read this out from someone who frequently gives us thoughtful contributions, David Moore?
Mm-hmm.
Just see what he has to say. This is your question for you. How is there that there was a 3-year consultation with farmers and 2 lengthy Tynwald debates to change the productive farm subsidy system to the countryside care scheme, whereas 2 or 3 people in DEFRA have been able to change the meat marketing system from a marketing service that took on to process and market all the island's production to the new meat marketing company system of only accepting animals that they have already sold on to meat buyers and requiring those that were booked in, but they do not require them to be rebooked, which has likely made them poorer quality meat, or use the new company's recommended alternative route to the market of live shipment without having any consultation. I hope you're following this, everybody, nor informing the systems that they were going to operate in spite of being the sole operator of the island's only meat plant. I'm sorry about reading it in a fairly stilted way there, David, who's sent that in, but if you could write in shorter sentences for someone, for myself, it would be easier. Right, I throw that in your direction, Mr. Baker.
Okay, John, well, thank you. And can I clarify that as well as a political member of DEFRA, I'm actually the chairman of the Isle of Man Meat Company Limited, which is the new operator of the meat plant.
You wear it lightly.
Well, it's certainly an interesting challenge, and David Moore, for every member of the agricultural community knows David. They know his position. He's spoken at length at every industry meeting that we've had. David harks back to a prior period when Manx agriculture was really successful, and particularly around headage. And that tied in with the red meat derogation, which the island undoubtedly benefited from.
Which, just to tell people, we no longer have a derogation, which obviously was the big blow, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and effectively, the meat plant failed to adapt. Manx agriculture hasn't adapted quickly enough, collectively, to that change, and arguably, we're now paying the price for that. So, to contextualise what David's raised a lot of points in there, which I'm not going to be able to address in the time that we've got. But fundamentally, the meat plant has to change radically, and that has to be fixed in order to bring a vibrant future back to Manx
Is it on the way there? I mean, when can we next expect to hear an announcement of progress there?
Well, the reality is it's a business turnaround. We've gone through probably 2 years of uncertainty. There was a review that DEFRA was engaged in at the September 16 elections. That continued through. That led ultimately to the decision to go out to tender to see whether there were new private operators who would take the meat plant on. That was announced to the industry in February of last year. That didn't find a successful
so just in
tender.
a nutshell, when will the next step be taken?
Well, the next step is being taken day by day, week by week. It's a business turnaround that involves fundamentally sorting out the meat plant business, and some of the things that David refers to in his message there are changes that the new board, the new management team have brought in, which clearly, if you keep doing the things that you've been doing, you're going to get the same sort of results as you've been getting. The results that we've got historically are not sustainable.
But is there going to be a date when you say, that's it, we've now got the new form in place?
It's continuous improvement. I mean, the whole business is being taken apart and put back together again.
But in the meantime, farmers obviously are getting disenchanted and leaving.
No. David Moore is getting disenchanted. There's a lot of support in the industry for the direction of travel. After the last industry meeting, I got a number of emails over the following couple of days saying from farmers who don't stand up and speak at these meetings, saying, please don't take the comments that are made by some of these people as representative of the industry. They are not.
Well, let's just move on to buildings. And an MHK, Jason Morehouse, has suggested that there should be a fund. I'm speaking particularly about the Castle Mona. There should be a fund put together whereby a national property fund, whereby buildings such as the Castle Mona could be acquired, I suppose, for the nation.
You've actually got two benefits. You've got one benefit that the property can be bought by the government quickly and effectively, but you've also got the other advantage that property of national interest and national importance can be taken on and protected and kept by the government, the people.
Do you think that the legislation we have in terms of planning and in terms of maintenance of historic buildings, do you think it's sufficient, or do you think it does the job?
I'm hopeful that it is sufficient, but I'm worried it's not.
Rob Callister, obviously it's not good having the Castle Mona surrounded by that rather unsightly netting. It'd be nice to have something happening there, even if it could even be a tourist attraction, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I took on board what Jason actually said in his comments. But realistically, we can't just start buying up every single property that we feel we need or feel that we should buy because nobody in the private sector wants to actually take on board the risk. However, if there is certain buildings, we'll use the police station in Castletown. The Manx National Heritage put forward a reasonable case to actually take that property on board, have it back out, rented and gain income from it within a relative small period of time. I felt in that case, it was absolutely warranted. Something like the Castle Mona, it needs a lot of money, and we're not just talking about the purchase price of maybe £1 million or £1.5 million.
Well, I heard a figure of 20 million to put the whole thing back.
We're talking several £1 million to repair and put. But then at the end of it, you have to have a purpose. And I know myself personally as a trustee on the Manx National Heritage, I spoke to senior officers within there and felt, is there anything that the Manx Museum could take on? Maybe it's a new location, but it wasn't big enough for their purpose. So there is inquiries, but realistically, is it government's job to step in and buy every single building that seems to fall down?
Not every single building, but have something in emergency where it's deemed the Castle Mona. I think most people appreciate it's a fairly historic building, built in the beginning of the 1800s.
But to buy a building of any significance, there has to be a purpose, and I feel the right way to buy historic buildings is through the Manx National Heritage,
Mr. Baker,
and for them to make a case to Treasury.
Could it be fine? Could it be fine for the Castle Mona, do you think?
Well, I would certainly hope so. I mean, it's a building in a very prominent position on Douglas Prom. Douglas Prom, as we've talked about earlier, is going to be given a real facelift by the investments going in there, and it would be great to see a positive future for the Castle Mona. But let's not forget, we're talking about a piece of property that's in private ownership right now. And it's been brought to the market in many and varied ways, and it hasn't sold. My understanding of, and I don't know the detail of what was proposed, but there was a very credible buyer with some credible plans. And as
The
Rob
impetus
said,
given they hadn't really thought through the funding of once they bought it.
Well, I mean,
or they couldn't get hold of the funding,
it's two
whoever
different
they were.
Two different things there, aren't there? I mean, a developer obviously has to bring funding in and has to have a business plan. Then you usually get external finance banks or whatever. I mean, maybe it needed more money than they were able to deliver, but we know that there are people out there with innovative plans. I mean, you've seen movement on Lord Street fairly recently. That's a development site that's been empty for 20, 30 years.
We must wait till May the 14th to see what interest there is, if anyone has interest in taking on because that's the auction date, May the 14th. Obviously, it was put to auction last time and then withdrawn just before the auction. Mr. Cowie, can I just read this to you? Mr. Cowie, I was talking to visitors in Ramsey yesterday that didn't even know there was a Morag Park, perhaps because the Ramsey Chamber of Trade objected the coaches visiting the park. So now the coach is set our visitors down opposite a funeral home. They then wander down our quayside to see all the rundown properties from the Commie? What's the Commie? Commercial?
The public house, the commercial.
And nightlife. With the, let me just get that out of the way, which has just got in. Get that out of the way. And nightlife with the also the building next to the Trafalgar, etc., etc. Then off. Well, anyway, he goes on for quite some time, basically saying they're wandering around the place and not getting straight to where they should be, which is the Morag Park. It does seem a little lack of direction there, doesn't it?
Well, there are direction signs, and we have installed some new notice boards just adjacent to the coach park.
Just let me go on. In the 60s, the Queen's Prom had Manx flags flying from the prom wall. Now the walls are just crumbling. Come on, Ramsey Commissioners, get your town tidied up. Well, that's a challenge.
Well, we are working on it. There has been significant work done in recent years. The regeneration
Do you accept the
works.
walls are crumbling a bit?
Indeed, but they're being repaired as well. You have to look at the North Promenade. The wall actually crumbled in on the last storm, and the DIY teams are working away at the moment, replacing them, rebuilding them, fit for the future. So
you accept the criticism and say work is in progress?
There is work to do. We're conscious of that, but we are working on that. Again, the Market Square that the gentleman mentioned, assuming it was a gentleman, has recently been refurbished and is looking a lot tidier than previously.
Welcome back. Present Politics, just ahead of the Man in Line, which will start at 1 o'clock in the chairs. Today, in front of me, Rob Callister, who's in the Department for Enterprise. He's the member in charge of tourism. And also Tim Baker, Ayre and Michael, the member. And sitting straight in front of me is Andy Cowie, who's just stepped down as chairman for Ramsey Commissioners. This for you, Mr. Baker. Why are you telling farmers to sell their livestock off island? This is usually frowned upon, and yet you are promoting it.
No.
The smacking of lips there. Presumably you disagree.
We're not promoting it. It was David Moore's assertion in his email that we were. What we're saying is that there's two routes to market for Manx livestock. One is through the meat plant. The second is through live shipping. It's a legitimate route to market. What we have seen over recent years is that there's been increasing volumes being shipped live because the prices that were being offered through the meat plant weren't good enough. That's been fundamentally changed by the new pricing structure that's been brought in since the 29th of March when Almond Meat Company Limited took over. So now the pricing stands comparison to the UK. The issue is that for some animals, the market cannot be accessed by Almond Meats at this point in time because, for example, into major UK retail, we just don't have that route to market right now. So that's something that's being worked on by the new board. The second thing is a capacity issue that if all the animals on the island were to come through the meat plant, we would have to step up the capacity of the meat plant, not necessarily the physical capacity.
Well, it's big enough, isn't it? Wasn't that the complaint? It was lying empty for
as I say, John, not necessarily the physical capacity, but the operational capacity. So
right.
we would need to bring more. We would need to have more people in to actually process. Obviously, its labour force is geared to the volume of animals that it's processing at the moment. So, it needs a controlled, gradual expansion. and we need to have routes to market to sell the animals.
We'll watch this space with interest. Interested to hear your views, incidentally, out there. 166 177. Someone suggested, Mr. Callister, we use the Bee Gees more. That we're not using them as a marketing tool that they do in Australia. They capitalise on the Manx brothers for tourism. Why not us? Their recording of Ellen Vannon is already a great marketing tool. They do have an enormous global pull, the Bee Gees, don't they?
They do, but as you say, what we're trying to do is to attract more people to the Isle of Man. I think we've had a wonderful ambassador in John Rhys-Davies doing the voiceover, and I think that will actually reach out to a lot of people who know his voice from Lord of the Rings, etc. I feel we're doing a great job of marketing the Isle of Man. There is a lot of, when you're booking a holiday, there's a lot of destinations you can choose. So to suddenly pick the Isle of Man is really difficult. What we need to make sure is actually everything on the Isle of Man that we're offering is absolutely up to speed, should we say, and absolutely of the best quality. And that includes our footpaths. And that's a question I've got down for next week. You know, our footpaths. We have a lot of people come here for walking holidays, but they can't walk around our footpaths because half of them are over.
I've always wondered that. At the beginning of the year, we don't have someone go around with a snagging list and say this needs doing and get it in order before the season starts.
But this is what we're saying. We've got to step up to the mark. If we're offering walking holidays, and people should be able to walk around the footpaths. I've been walking, not this year, but last year I walked quite a lot of the Renfellian Walk, and it's beautiful. And the amount of times, you know, I had to find a different route because the path was blocked. So it's you know, we've got to absolutely step up to the mark, and whatever we're providing is of the best quality.
Yeah, if I can add to that with my Department of Infrastructure perspective, the footpaths have been historically maintained as part of the roads budget. We all know that the road maintenance budget has been lacking, and that's been very clear from the discussions around road tax. What is happening with footpaths is two things. Number one is that the department is very much focusing on dealing with those iconic footpaths, the Radnor Follen and the Lennon Way, etc., that are crucial and very much part of the tourism offering. But it's also taking a strategic approach and working with third sector partners.
But should you be dealing with, shouldn't it be a tourism thing? It's so important to tourism, these footpaths. Shouldn't tourism even be contributing or doing something to help you with
Well,
this?
I'm sure if the Department for Enterprise wished to co-fund, then that would be fine. But DOI has management responsibility for the footpaths, and it's got the workforce. It's also got the relationships with the third sector partners, which are engaged now in terms of doing local maintenance. Beach Buddies, for instance, have recently carried out maintenance on several of the footpaths, which are quite minor footpaths, but they've made a major difference, and that's actually using community service offenders managed by Beach Buddies in conjunction with the probation service to actually deliver real benefits to the island. And I think that's a fantastic piece of joined up working.
Andy Cowie, you've got some nice paths around Ramsey, particularly up towards the tower there on the head and round about the area. They're looked after. Do the commissioners look after them?
We look after the paths within the town. There are some walks within the town, but the head Alberta Tower and all is actually outside Ramsey, so we don't look after those.
Really, it's in Mackled, is it? So,
Yeah,
Garth, is it? So you don't look after it, but it's all. You shouldn't.
Again, we look after the town.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. I once slept in a sleeping bag under there, which I'd only unwrapped. It was used as a boy, and it turned out it only went up to my waist, so I spent a freezing night on there. Can I just go from that subject onto another one, which has been exciting people, and that's dentistry on the island. The government basically said they could have no more funded NHS places. A dentist from the Grove Mount in Ramsey said that prevention should come before cure. His name was Tanos Karesius.
No, it doesn't need to be the case. If these patients can get allocated by the department and the department gets some extra funding for these patients to other practice, I'm sure they will be seen straight away. So what I've read about patients not being able to do checkups anymore, which I find appalling as a thought, because the idea of dentistry is primarily to prevent dental disease, not just to treat patients as an emergency, which has been done till now.
Is there, as far as your experience and concern, and Aaron Michael, Mr. Baker, people saying we can't get a dentist?
to be honest, it's not one of the issues that's filled my inbox or had my phone ringing excessively. I mean, clearly there is an issue around dentistry and the health service generally, and I think what we're talking about here is NHS provision of dentistry being challenged, and I think it speaks to the wider debate around health service provision and what's.
Should more people actually be paying for their own dentist work?
Well, I mean, there's the whole.
Or in a plan of some sort. I'm in a plan. I must admit, I pay whatever it is, and that's me looked after. Should more people be doing that?
Well, I mean, that's really a matter for the Minister for Health and Social Care, David Ashford, to be setting the direction of travel in there. But clearly, there's a means testing issue. What we need to do is make sure that people who need services are able to access them, and if they financially can't afford them, then clearly those need to be provided free at the point of need. Equally, there are other people who would think nothing of paying an appropriate price for dental service, and clearly a lot of people already go private. So I think it's about that balance, and I don't think we've quite got it right at the moment.
And Cowie, do we need to think more about paying for ourselves?
I'm not sure it's paying for ourselves. It's making sure we have sufficient provision and so that people can access an NHS dentist after. The point about dental care being in prevention rather than cure is absolutely vital, I think. And it's not so much the lack of dentists available, it's sometimes the delays in accessing a dentist. It can take sort of 3 months to get an appointment on occasion within Ramsey and the NHS dentists, and that certainly needs a bit of looking at, I think.
You only need to have had bad toothache to know how awful it is. Rob Callister around Onchan, do they complain about lack of places?
Actually, I had a surgery only a couple of weeks ago, and
not a dental surgery.
It was one of the topics that was brought up, especially relating to school children who had been referred for additional treatment. I have a few constituents that have highlighted this, that their children were referred 3 years ago on one particular case. They had an appointment this last couple of weeks, and the appointment was less than 20 seconds. But they've been referred for treatment. So I've picked that up already with the health minister and asked what's actually happening with these children that have been referred and been waiting, a number of years for treatment. They've had a visit or a sort of a review, and they've not the additional treatment's not started yet. So there is concerns around especially school children and referred treatment.
The impression is given that our children's teeth are not as good as it used to be because of the amount of sweet things that they eat.
Possibly,
that's accurate, isn't it?
Possibly, but I think we should do everything we can to actually make sure that children have the best teeth going into their adult life. They really should.
I suppose it's vital. You'll miss your teeth when they're gone. And one just a subject before we go to the news at 1 o'clock. We've got another hour after this of the Man in Line talking to people. This is a Portsmouth report, Ayre, in which sort of politics are happening down there. And it's not entirely clear of why those politics are happening or what is happening. But the Portsmouth chairman, Lawrence Vaughan-Williams, has been on Manx Radio saying the idea of an amalgamation has sparked fears over redundancies, of course, amongst the two authorities, and says that there are more important things to worry about.
I didn't stand on a ticket of amalgamation. I stood as commissioner because I wanted to make the board we have work well, and it does work well, and our staff are absolutely superb. Our village is well maintained, and we hope to be able to bring the rates down. And quite frankly, I think that the talk of amalgamation with another board is destabilising.
I suppose there is talk, though, of it, isn't it? I mean, you've got two communities like that are quite close together and seem to be getting closer and closer by the day. Would it not make sense in terms of logistics to actually join them together and have one commission instead of two? I don't know. I'm just floating the idea. Not having lived in the area, we must go down and talk to people. Rob Callister, does it make sense?
Well, I've always believed in local authority reform. I've always cited 13 local authorities in the future of the size, sorry to say it, but of Onchan and Ramsey.
As opposed to 24 at the moment.
I think that sort of size is perfect because it's big enough to actually deliver the services, but small enough to absolutely be accountable. It's a message that I've said many times over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think that's fundamental. I think reduce it down to 13. I don't believe in the 5-1 system, never have. Having 5 local authorities of the size of Douglas, I just don't feel it delivers what it needs to deliver. I've looked at Ramsey's model, I've looked at Onchan, they're almost identical with regard to the services and how their structures work, and I feel they work well. I wouldn't be against a merger in the south, but it's not for me to make that call. But I don't think it'll happen.
Think they should have a referendum?
I don't think it'll happen personally.
Mr. Baker.
Well, I think that the crucial thing is focusing on the outcomes, not the organisational model. And you can have lots of different ways of structuring local authorities, but it's about how they deliver the service. And I think the model in the north is quite an interesting one. You've got Ramsey surrounded by some very rural authorities, and there's quite a lot of joined up working. And I'd like to see local authorities working together much more closely. And actually, the organisational structure, I think you can achieve the same objectives, but with different organisational structures.
You're nodding your head there, Andy Cowie.
Yeah, I'm certainly at the moment. There's a lot more demands placed on the local authorities. They're taking over far more responsibilities from central government, and there's a lot more things to look at in terms of health and safety.
If they were bigger, it would make more sense for them to take things on, wouldn't it?
Indeed, yes. And I think maybe one model to look at going forwards might be to have sort of larger authorities providing a service to the smaller authorities, so they still retain their independence, but the economies of scale and management and so on are provided from the larger more centralised authority.
Excellent. Well, we've come to the end of the first hour of Present Politics. My guests, thank you very much, can stay on, I hope, for the second half and talk to some of our listeners about their points. Rob Callister is with us, Andy Cowie, we've just been talking, and Tim Baker.